4. A visit to Madame Lilli Lehmann. A number of years before the Great War, a party of us were spending a few weeks in Berlin. It was midsummer. The city, filled as it was for one of us at least, with dear memories of student days, was in most alluring mood. Flowers bloomed along every balcony, vines festooned themselves from windows and doorways, as well as from many unexpected corners. The parks, large and small, which are the delight of a great city, were at their best and greenest, gay with color. Many profitable hours were spent wandering through the galleries and museums, hearing concerts and opera, and visiting the old quarters of the city, so picturesque and full of memories. Two of us, who were musicians, were anxious to meet the famous dramatic soprano, Lilli Lehmann, who was living quietly in one of the suburbs of the city. Notes were exchanged, and on a certain day we were bidden to come, out of the regular hours for visitors, by special exception. How well I remember the drive through the newer residential section of Berlin. The path before long led us through country estates, past beautifully kept gardens and orchards. Our destination was the little suburb of Grunewald, itself like a big garden, with villas nestling close to each other, usually set back from the quiet, shaded streets. Some of the villas had iron gratings along the pathway, through which one saw gay flowers and garden walks, often statuary and fountains. Other homes were secluded from the street by high brick walls, frequently decorated on top by urns holding flowers and drooping vines. Behind such a picturesque barrier, we found the gateway which led to Madame Lehmann's cottage. We rang and soon a trim maid came to undo the iron gate. The few steps leading to the house door did not face us as we entered the enclosure, but led up from the side. We wanted to linger and admire the shrubs and flowering plants, but the maid hastened before us, so we had to follow. From the wide entrance hall doors led into rooms on either hand. We were shown into a salon on the left and bidden to await Madame's coming. In the few moments of restful quiet before she entered, we had time to glance over the sanctum of a great artist. To say it was filled with mementos and objets d'art hardly expresses the sense of repleteness. Every square foot was occupied by some treasure. Let the eye travel around the room. At the left, as one entered the doorway, stood a fine bust of the artist, chiseled in pure white marble, supported on a pedestal of black marble. Then came 3 long, French windows, opening into a green garden. Across the farther window stood a grand piano, loaded with music. At the further end of the room, if memory serves, hung a large, full-length portrait of the artist herself. A writing desk, laden with souvenirs, stood near. On the opposite side, a divan covered with rich brocade, more paintings on the walls, one very large landscape by a celebrated German painter. Before we could note further details, Madame Lehmann stood in the doorway, then came forward and greeted us cordially. How often I had seen her impersonate her great roles, both in Germany and America. They were always of some queenly character. Could it be possible this was the famous Lehmann, this simple housewife, in black skirt and white blouse, with a little apron as badge of homekeeping? But there was the stately tread, the grand manner, the graceful movement. What mattered if the silver hair were drawn back severely from the face? There was the dignity of expression, classic features, penetrating glance, and mobile mouth I remembered. After chatting a short time and asking many questions about America, where her experiences had been so pleasant, our talk was interrupted, for a little, by a voice trial, which Madame had agreed to give. Many young singers, from everywhere, were anxious to have expert judgment on their progress or attainments, so Lehmann was often appealed to and gave frequent auditions of this kind. The fee was considerable, but she never kept a penny of it for herself. It all went to one of her favorite charities. The young girl who on this day presented herself for the ordeal was an American who, it seemed, had not carried her studies very far. Examining a pupil. Madame Lehmann seated herself at the piano and asked for scales and vocalizes. The young girl, either from fright or poor training, did not make a very fortunate impression. She could not seem to bring out a single pure steady tone, much less sing scales acceptably. Madame, with a resigned look, finally asked for a song, which was given. It was a little song of Franz, I remember. Then Lehmann wheeled around on the stool and said to us in German, "The girl cannot sing. She has little or no voice to begin with, and has not been rightly trained." Then to the young girl she said, kindly, in English, "My dear young lady, you have almost everything to learn about singing, for as yet you cannot even sing one tone correctly, you cannot even speak correctly. First of all, you need physical development. You must broaden your chest through breathing exercises. You are too thin-chested. You must become physically stronger if you ever hope to sing acceptably. Then you must study diction and languages. This is absolutely necessary for the singer. Above all, you must know how to pronounce and sing in your own language." So many do not think it necessary to study their own language. They think they know that already, but one's mother tongue requires study as well as any other language. The trouble with American girls is they are always in a hurry. They are not content to sit down quietly and study till they have developed themselves into something before they ever think of coming to Europe. They think if they can just come over here and sing for an artist, that fact alone will give them prestige in America. But that gives them quite the opposite reputation over here. American girls are too often looked upon as superficial because they come over here quite unprepared. I say to all of them, as I say to you, go home and study. There are plenty of good teachers of voice and piano in your own land. Then, when you can sing, come over here if you wish, but do not come until you are prepared. After this little episode, we continued our talk for a while longer. Then, fearing to trespass on her time, we rose to leave. She came to the door with us, followed us down the steps into the front garden, and held the gate open for us when we finally left. We had already expressed the hope that she might be able to return to America at no very distant day and repeat her former triumphs there. Her fine face lighted at the thought, and her last words to us were, as she held open the little iron wicket, "I have a great desire to go to your country again. Perhaps, in a year or two, who knows, I may be able to do it." She stood there, a noble, commanding figure, framed in the green of her garden, and waved her handkerchief till our cab turned a corner and she was lost to our view. The Mozart Festival. Several years later, a year before the World War started, to be exact, we had the pleasure of meeting the artist again, and this time, of hearing her sing. It was the occasion of the Mozart Festival in Salzburg. It is well known that Lehmann, devoted as she has always been to the genius of Mozart, and one of the greatest interpreters of his music, had thrown her whole energy into the founding of a suitable memorial to the master in his native city. This memorial was to consist of a large music school, a concert hall, and home for opera. The Mozarteum was not yet completed, but a festival was held each year in Salzburg to aid the project. Madame Lehmann was always present and sang on these occasions. We timed our visit to Mozart's birthplace so that we should be able to attend the festival, which lasted as usual 5 days. The concerts were held in the Aula Academica, a fine saal in the old picturesque quarter of the city. At the opening concert, Lehmann sang a long, difficult concert aria of Mozart. We could not help wondering, before she began, how time had treated this great organ, whether we should be able to recognize the famous Lehmann who had formerly taken such high rank as singer and interpreter in America. We need not have feared that the voice had become impaired. Or, if it had been, it had become rejuvenated on this occasion. Madame Lehmann sang with all her well-remembered power and fervor, all her exaltation of spirit, and of course, she had a great ovation at the close. She looked like a queen in ivory satin and rare old lace, with jewels on neck, arms, and in her silver hair. In the auditorium, 3 armchairs had been placed in front of the platform. The Archduke, Prince Eugen, the royal patron of the festival, occupied one. When Madame Lehmann had finished her aria, she stepped down from the platform. The prince rose at once and went to meet her. She gave him her hand with a graceful courtesy, and he led her to the armchair next his own, which had evidently been placed in position for her special use. At the close of the concert, we had a brief chat with her. The next day she was present at the morning concert. This time she was gowned in black, with an ermine cape thrown over her shoulders. The Archduke sat beside her in the armchair, as he had done the evening before. We had a bow and smile as she passed down the aisle. We trust the Mozarteum in Salzburg, for which Madame Lehmann has labored with such devotion, will one day fulfill its noble mission. Lehmann the teacher. As a teacher of the art of singing, Madame Lehmann has long been a recognized authority, and many artists now actively before the public have come from under her capable hands. Her book, How to Sing, rendered in English by Richard Aldrich Macmillan, has illumined the path for many a serious student who seeks light on that strange, wonderful, hidden instrument, the voice. Madame Lehmann, by means of many explanations and numerous plates, endeavors to make clear to the young student how to begin and how to proceed in her vocal studies. Breathing. On the important subject of breathing, she says, "No one can sing without preparing for it mentally and physically. It is not enough to sing well, one must know how one does it. I practice many breathing exercises without using tone. Breath becomes voice through effort of will and by use of vocal organs. When singing, emit the smallest quantity of breath. Vocal cords are breath regulators, relieve them of all overwork. At the start, a young voice should be taught to begin in the middle and work both ways, that is, up and down. A tone should never be forced. Begin piano, make a long crescendo and return to piano. Another exercise employs 2 connecting half tones, using 1 or 2 vowels. During practice, stand before a mirror, that one may see what one is doing. Practice about 1 hour daily. Better that amount each day than 10 hours one day and none the next. The test will be, do you feel rested and ready for work each morning? If not, you have done too much the day before. Registers. In regard to registers, Madame Lehmann has this to say: in the formation of the voice, no registers should exist or be created. As long as the word is kept in use, registers will not disappear. Physiology. In spite of the fact there are many drawings and plates illustrating the various organs of head and throat which are used in singing, Madame Lehmann says, the singer is often worried about questions of physiology, whereas she must know little about it. The nasal quality. The singer must have some nasal quality, otherwise the voice sounds colorless and expressionless. We must sing toward the nose, not necessarily through the nose. For many ills of the voice and tone production, I use long, slow scales. They are an infallible cure. Use of the lips. The lips play a large part in producing variety of tone quality. Each vowel, every word can be colored, as by magic, by well-controlled play of the lips. When lips are stiff and unresponsive, the singing is colorless. Lips are final resonators, through which tones must pass, and lip movements can be varied in every conceivable manner. Power and velocity. She humorously writes, singers without power and velocity are like horses without tails. For velocity, practice figures of 5, 6, 7, and 8 notes, first slowly, then faster and faster up and down.